This is a special edition of WeatherScope, live coverage of Winter Storm 96.
And good morning. The wild winter of 1996 continues as once again the megalopolis under the gun with some heavy snow and even some sleet this time mixing in. We got a whole mess of weather coming into New York and Boston a little bit later on, but we'll show you where it is right now as we take you down toward Philadelphia and also into Washington. Right now, some very heavy snow just starting to wind down now around Baltimore and D.C. They got 5 inches new at Baltimore. D.C.'s got about 4 to 6 as well. And that heavy snow band comes all the way up through Philadelphia and now across the Garden State Parkway. But just to the south of that, you will notice this little area here of enhancement. Looks like thunderstorms in the summer, but this time of the year it is sleet showing up very nicely on the radar, and that is all pulling to the north as well. And check this out, it's all taking aim on New York City if it continues to move on off to the north. So a start there and a changeover quickly to what could be moderate to even some heavy sleet. Well, standing in between New York and Washington where the snow is tapering off, we have our very own Bill Keneally. Bill, what's the weather like there and how much snow have you received so far this morning?
Jim, our snow began about 6:30 this morning, and so far we've had about 2, maybe 2.5 inches in about 3.5 hours time. Again, the cold air is not budging. We have a pretty stiff northeast wind at this time, and the road crews are out there. The roadways are open, by the way. It's not that bad, a little slushy at this hour. Now the schools again are shut 5 days in a row. The kids have been off from school. They'll pay for it come June. There is a snow emergency in effect. Parking is very, very limited. But I think a lot of folks have heeded the winter storm warning that was issued for the area about midnight last night.
You know, when you live in the Northeast, you always kind of anticipate that next snowstorm to cover up all the dirty snow piles on the side of the roads. Almost looks like it's doing that pretty well, Bill.
Well, not only that, Jim, it's covering up cars pretty well. A lot of the side roads are still, they're barely plowed. I talked to one guy earlier today. He said he had to go out about 150 feet, him and his buddies out there shoveling out a roadway, not just their car, to get on out to a main thoroughfare that was a little better plowed.
All right, thank you very much, Bill. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit as the snow continues to come down in Philadelphia at a pretty good clip. Up the road a piece, we have Jill Brown. We'll talk to her in just a moment, but I want to show you the Doppler radar out of New York City. Check this there, actually out of New Jersey, and you can see this area of enhancement right here. That is sleet. To the south of that is all rain at the present time. This is the area of sleet, which continues to push on to the north, and it's just to the north of that we have all snow. Now this mixed bag of precipitation is just going to continue to work its way northeast. So if you live in New York, let's say Long Island, well, guess what? You got rain coming your way, but over the city, probably a start to snow, going to moderate sleet, then a gradual changeover. But I'll tell you folks, just 50 to 100 miles inland here, up through Orange County and down in toward, and perhaps as far south as Piscataway in New Jersey, we could be seeing a very heavy bunch of sleet, freezing rain, and also some snow. So some problems there. Let's take you up into New York City right now, where Jill is in Manhattan. And Jill, what's the weather like there?
Well, Jim, as you can see, here we go again. The snow has begun in Manhattan. The problem is at this point is that it's blowing snow. It's definitely gotten a little bit heavier. We had snow pellets briefly, now snowflakes with some light accumulation. Not enough to send the plows out, I think, just yet. But the plows were still busy trying to get rid of the last snow, and that's the biggest problem. Snow routes, still no parking there, and they will be ticketing or towing. And so actually, some of the schools have already canceled for today or are planning on getting out early. So while we're not expecting this storm to last long and we're likely to see a changeover, the real problem is that it's going to hamper the cleanup really from the last storm.
Yeah, it's making for a great weekend. Thank you very much, Jill. We'll talk to you just a little bit later on. Look for the snow and the sleet to pick up there. Well, folks, let's talk about this storm just a little bit if we could. We'll go and first of all show you what has happened and then get into a little bit more as to what's going to happen. Again, a look at the radar as all that mess continues to work toward the tri-state area. Look at the infrared satellite picture. Our surface low is down here off the map, but our upper level low, which we haven't talked a lot about, is still producing some very heavy snow in the upper Ohio Valley into the Laurel Highlands, and we're getting snowfall there. An additional 2 to 4 inches is expected, and that'll just continue to travel on off toward the north and east. Then we have a little dry area here, which is actually helping to shut off the precipitation around Washington, but further to the north is where we have our mess, and this is the heavy snow that'll continue to track up to the north and east. And again, folks, a real tricky forecast situation because this low pressure is pumping in some serious warm air from the Atlantic. We've got 40 degrees already down at Chincoteague, and up to the north here it's still in the low to mid-teens across western Pennsylvania. So you can see the big change in temperature there. What's going to happen is that warm air with the warm front is going to try and overtake this cold air, but because cold air is more dense, it's going to hold put. So you're talking about 50 to 100 miles near the coastline where you're going to see this whole thing rain, freezing rain, sleet, and snow. A lot of it's going to mix together as well, especially as we look at the structure of the atmosphere. There's some dry air for about 1,000 feet in some of the lower layers, and that's going to allow some of that moisture to evaporate. So we're just going to get a ton of messy weather. What does this mean? We talked about with Bill and Jill about what that means for the traveler, but what does that mean for the folks traveling to the airports? Some big problems. Let's talk to Will about that in the studio.
Okay, Jim, it looks like the snow beginning to wind down a little bit around Washington and Baltimore, but the damage is done. The airports are closed there. Major delays now beginning to shape up around New York City and Newark, and also looking at some major delays, of course, right around Philadelphia, and more to come as we look at the next, let's say, 6 to 10 hours.
This is a special edition of WeatherScope, live coverage of Winter Storm 96.
Well, those of you with cabin fever already, looks like it's going to be a while. Lots of winter weather on the way for the Northeast once again today to add aggravation to what still is very vivid of the blizzard of 96 with a lot of snow. This time snow, sleet, freezing rain, the whole gamut, especially north of Philly into New York and Boston. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let me show you the radar. You can see what's going on here. The heavy band of snow which continues to work through Philadelphia and down into Baltimore now up toward Wilmington, Delaware. They had snow at 2 inches an hour last hour. But you'll notice on the south side of that there is another band of enhancement on the radar picture here, and that's where we're getting some of the sleet. And to the south of that, it is all rain down around Atlantic City and back toward Dover. But all this is working its way to the northeast, and we're wondering where exactly that changeover line is going to be. Looks like Philly, Baltimore, D.C., you are going to stay all snow as we work our way through the next several hours. And, you know, we haven't talked much about the Susquehanna Valley or even back to the Laurel Highlands here, but that's where the upper level low is being the lift on northeast, where they're tapping some of this moisture, and there's some very heavy snow coming down right now around Allatoona, 1/4 mile S+, which translates to heavy snow with a 1/4 mile visibility. Standing in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, Bill Keneally. Bill, what's the latest in Philadelphia?
Jim, we've had snow now for 4 hours, and already we've had 3 inches of snowfalls coming down. Right now at the rate of probably 1.5 inches per hour, I would estimate. Our winds are holding firm out of the northeast. They're getting gusty at times, and you talked about some freezing rain across the Delaware. We are about a couple miles to the northwest of the downtown. Right in front of me, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Earlier, you had a great panorama of the city skyline looking right down the Ben Franklin Parkway. Now our visibility cut to about 1/4 mile. Air temperature about 25 degrees at this hour. The city is pretty much hunkered down, and schools are shut for the 5th day in a row.
The good news is with this storm, anyway, we're heading into a weekend as opposed to heading out of one. Have you heard anything about the airports?
I have not, Jim, but the wind is still pretty much out of the northeast over there. Although you talked about Wrightstown and Millville going over to freezing rain, I suspect That is the last weather element they would like at this time, and they have had heavy snow for the past 4 hours as well.
Yeah, just down the road a piece too. Dulles as well as National closed right now for snow removal.
Wow.
Probably similar situation coming up in Philadelphia. Thanks a lot, Bill. Okay. We'll take you back here to the Doppler radar, and I want to show you what's going on with this with a little more detail. This is out of New Jersey here, and you can see what's going on the Doppler. A lot of enhancement to this, and Stu Oster was talking to me a little while ago, and he says, you know, it's amazing when you look at this Doppler and go back even a few years ago and how different it is now. You can really pick out the detail of the sleet here, and of course to the south of that we've got the rain, and to the north of that some of this darker green here, very, very heavy snow, which should be approaching New York City as we work our way on in time. And let's see how just how close it is to New York City. Standing by in Manhattan, we have our very own Jill Brown, who has never left New York since the blizzard. Jill, you getting used to the Big Apple?
I think we are. We're really adapting here. But now we're getting some bigger flakes. We're getting some accumulation. And actually, this is a little bit different than what we had during the blizzard, at which time we had just tiny little flakes, and we didn't have this kind of accumulation except for about an hour's time. But it's really coming down at this point. You can see in some of the cars that have just been parked here recently, they're already pretty much covered with snow. And as you can see, there's quite a backup here at this point. A lot of activity, and the road's down to one lane, and it's going to be a mess, I think, here in Manhattan. Temperature's about 31 degrees, so we're pretty close to that point where we could start to see some of that warmer air warming it up a little bit more, and maybe we'll get some sleet and freezing rain. At this point, maybe kind of just the accumulation cleaning up some dirty snow that we had before and adding to the problems that still exist here in Manhattan.
Jill, I've just noticed about 3 or 4 firemen walking behind you. Do you know what all that commotion's about?
Just arrived, actually. Things have really become backed up at this point, so we'll find out what's going on. I guess I may let you know.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit. Folks, again, a messy situation in the Northeast once again as another round of winter weather makes its way on in. Let's go ahead and talk about this storm a little bit and what we think is happening, both with Jill and Bill. They were talking about the size of the snowflakes being a lot bigger, and we're getting a lot of warm air with this storm coming in from the Atlantic, and that is going to cause some forecast problems, especially from the tri-state area on up into southern and interior New England, where we are anticipating some changeover, but just how much? How much of a role is that snowpack going to play, and how much of that Arctic air is going to stay put? Here's how the snow looks now. Probably a little bit more back in the Laurel Highlands and around Pittsburgh. It's really been cranking there. They still got some snow advisories out for southeast Kentucky, but 5 inches new at Baltimore, and that heavy snow, as Bill mentioned, moving up into Philadelphia now with 3 inches on the ground. Again, look at our coastal front just kind of set up here. Tons of warm, moist air being blown in over the top of that. We always talk about a counterclockwise circulation around low pressure. That's going to bring in that moisture, and the upper low with its surface reflection back here is what's enhancing this snow still back through west central PA. Now, what's the problem here as we work our way on in time? Well, with that warm air coming on.
Washington International now is closed. Washington National the same, and for snow removal, Dulles Airport west of Washington, D.C. is now closed until further notice. We have delays already at LaGuardia Field and JFK in New York. More up into the Susquehanna Valley. Heavy snow is moving into Philadelphia, soon to be mixed with sleet perhaps in southeast Pennsylvania. And snow and sleet heading for New York City and then Boston later on. And snow amounts could be, snow could be very heavy at times, falling at 1 to 2 inches per hour. It is a fast-moving storm, so not as much snow is expected as compared to, say, the last one, the blizzard of '96 lately.